Video game adaptations have changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. They went from the red-headed stepchild of adaptations to the shiny new toy that every single studio wants to play with.
There seems to be a never-ending wave of video game adaptations that have either hit us already or are bound for impact.
Video game adaptations are something I've been talking about on the channel for a long time. They were actually the topic of my first ever video, so as much as I'd like to branch out from the video game adaptations, they are very much a part of this channel's DNA.
I love video games, and I love movies, but above all else, I love storytelling.
And that is something that reaches beyond genre and whatever medium you decide to use to tell a story.
One thing I found very interesting about video game adaptations is that a lot of them aren't one-to-one adaptations, and for a lot of them, they can't be.
You have stories like The Last of Us and Uncharted, which are already replicating classic storytelling formats and recreating a cinematic look in its cutscenes. The Last of Us gets a pretty faithful adaptation of its story because that's the reason people are playing. I wouldn't be shocked if the upcoming Until Dawn adaptation follows the plot of the game beat for beat because of that exact same reason. But you do run into an issue since that game does hinge on the concept of multiple endings. The newest look at the movie does show a creative solution to the problem of multiple endings, as it made the concept of dying in the game and going down multiple paths an actual mechanic that the story will operate in.
The movie has this mechanic where things start over and they get to try again.
Unfortunately, this does just feel like a separate project to me, with the Until Dawn name slapped on it for name recognition alone. But I do find the idea of games being adapted into films or series that were already inspired by films or series, like the Uncharted movie, kind of fascinating. The Uncharted games are essentially Indiana Jones, but in the modern day. Same thing goes for the most recent announcement of a Helldivers movie in the works from Sony.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
I don't really have much to add to that point, I just find it kind of interesting.
And on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have projects like Arcane,
But the game itself is not trying at all to be like a movie. It's 100% a game through and through. A game that causes many people severe depression. And the adaptation took its iconic characters with not a whole lot of story and translated them into a phenomenal original series that really delves deep into this world.
So instead of dooming and glooming, why not engage with the actual conversation? What are some games that would actually benefit from getting an adaptation? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.
Now listen, I'm not a big shot in Hollywood or anything, but I like to think that I have at least the same level-headed decision-making that Hollywood execs have.
If the people that greenlit the original Sonic design still have jobs, then I should be allowed to do this.
I also only want to include games that I am actually familiar with and have played, so if there are obvious things left off this list, like BioShock or Mass Effect, then that is probably why. Hades follows the story of Zagreus, the son of Hades, attempting and dying over and over again to escape the underworld and the oppressive rule of his father. An incredibly fun roguelike adventure game that explores the various locales of the underworld, from the burning pits of Asphodel to the overgrown gardens of Elysium.
I love this game. It's got a great gameplay loop, and of course it helps that I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology.
And don't even get me started on the art style. Some of the best character designs of these mythological figures that I have ever seen. I would be immensely hyped to see this franchise get turned into a season-long animated series. There are plenty of characters that Zagreus has relationships with that could be explored in a single season. The angry romantic tension that he shares with Megara, his sexual chemistry and friendship between Thanatos.
There's a lot of sexual chemistry between characters in Hades. It's practically a dating sim.
And of course the frustrating antagonism of his father Hades, who is always bearing down on him. The basic premise of Zagreus clawing his way up through the underworld and being stopped by his father's servants, who are also characters that he sometimes has a complicated history with, would make for some incredibly engaging storytelling. The opening cinematic alone shows exactly how cool this series could be if it were to be given the adaptation treatment, and it's personally one I'd really love to see.
Grand Theft Auto would be such a fun pick for an adaptation, because in my opinion, you don't even have to adapt it directly.
Each of the games are already so heavily influenced by their own handful of movies that you could take it in a similar direction. Instead of direct adaptations, I can imagine different seasons of an anthology series taking place in different locations throughout the world of Grand Theft Auto, while still being able to tell original stories following the basic setup of committing crimes.
Breaking Bad, Pulp Fiction, Boondock Saints, these all feel like they could be their own GTA game. So why not do this in reverse?
A season set in Liberty City following a band of brothers who owe money to the mob. A couple living in Vice City who is on the lam after a drug bust gone wrong. You can even have characters from the game show up in the stories and interact with the main cast of characters, or even be a part of the main cast of characters. The opportunities are limitless.
Before you start typing in the comments, hold that thought. I know that there is a live-action Legend of Zelda movie in development, but I am here to argue against that.
It is such a missed opportunity to not make an animated Legend of Zelda film. How did you fumble that so bad from the jump? How much of the newest Zelda games are so clearly influenced by Ghibli films like Princess Mononoke? So taking that beautiful world of Hyrule and turning it into the medium of live action does take away a lot of the diverse art styles that could be shown in the animated medium, and that the Zelda series is usually known for. While I'm sure the live-action Zelda movie will at least be fine, I can't say that I'm not a little disappointed.
Ideally, in my mind, we'd have a beautiful 2D hand-drawn Legend of Zelda movie.
I know I already mentioned them, but it's not like I'd ever expect a studio like Ghibli to even touch a project like this. Even settling for a 3D animated art style similar to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish or Spider-Verse could be great.
One of my favorite things about the Zelda series is every new iteration is a new take in a new time period or a new timeline.
Each version of Link and Zelda are so different, not only visually but in personality and character traits, so an adaptation wouldn't be beholden to adapting one of the games directly. You can make your own version of these characters in your own unique version of Hyrule that stands on its own from the games.
Resident Evil.
Yes, I know. I talk about Resident Evil adaptations a lot. It's what a lot of my subscribers know me for, but I couldn't not mention them in this video.
These games have had so many adaptations, much more than most other games even. It honestly might have more video game adaptations than any other video game property.
But none of them have been good. I'm sorry. I am sick of it.
Follow the game's story and get someone who clearly likes and cares about the series. I don't want to waste too much time on them here, so if you want to see me go into this in depth, I have 3 separate videos about various Resident Evil adaptations and why they are always such a mess. I recorded this video before the news came out that Barbarian's own Zach Kreger would be helming a new Resident Evil movie, which is something I can't not talk about. Seeing as Barbarian was a movie that already felt like a Resident Evil story, I think this news is very exciting. Hell, I already mentioned that Barbarian would be a good template in tone and structure for a Resident Evil movie in my previous video. Sometimes I've even looked at other films for inspiration as what could make a great Resident Evil movie. Barbarian, People Under the Stairs, Evil Dead Rise. While I am very excited for this project, I am still going to keep my expectations in check, as I have been burned numerous times before. Alright, Zach, don't let me down. Starfox is a series that I am not super familiar with, seeing as I only played the N64 Starfox game, and I think I got stuck on a level, and I also played that really weird Starfox game that's set on a dinosaur island for some reason.
So no, I'm not exactly the best person to speak on the qualities of the Starfox series, but I think they're pretty cool games, and I think they'd make for an awesome series of animated movies.
All of the character designs are incredibly striking and, of course, iconic. A squadron of anthropomorphic animal companions led by the one and only Starfox on a mission to protect the galaxy. There is just so much wiggle room there to make a fun space adventure film, similar in tone to that of the old Star Wars films and the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy.
And could you imagine how much money you'd get out of furries if you nailed that character design?
Just look how well the Sonic movies have been doing ever since they fixed that design. Dead Space has cemented itself in the gaming world as a classic sci-fi horror game. When it was made, it was essentially pitched as Resident Evil 4 in space.
And if you know anything about me, you know I'm a big sucker for Resident Evil.
The story of Isaac Clarke, a space engineer boarding the USS Ishimura in search of his wife Nicole. Only when boarding the vessel do they realize that it's been infested with nightmarish creatures called necromorphs. From then on, it's a fight for survival to get through the desecrated ship, to uncover the darkness within, and to find your wife.
Dead Space is straight up sci-fi survival horror.
I didn't play it when it came out because I was a scared little baby, but I did play the remake from a couple years ago. With the remake revitalizing the franchise as of late, the perfect opportunity to craft a sci-fi horror film to capitalize is now. Even John Carpenter, the director of classics like They Live, Halloween, and most importantly, The Thing, has even discussed his interest in directing a Dead Space adaptation.
So I say, let the crazy old kook do it.
All he ever does is play video games nowadays.
Play video games. I watch NBA basketball. I watch the news. I play video games.
So who better than him to adapt Dead Space?
Dead Space would make a great space horror movie. It would just be great.
The guy who created one of the greatest body horror films of all time, adapting one of the most terrifying body horror games of all time, sounds like a match made in heaven.
Stand by for Titanfall.
For those who don't know, Titanfall is a sci-fi action game set in a warring world where the primary combat is done in Titans, these militarized mechs that need to be piloted. The only good story to come out of Titanfall is that of the second game, since the first game practically has no story.
Titanfall 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's almost certainly my favorite FPS of all time.
The world and characters, as well as the relationships they have with one another, would be a perfect choice for a movie adaptation. There are so many levels and sequences in that second game that would translate into live action really well. Seeing the time travel brought to life, or the boss battle with a Viper on the roof of a massive ship,
I would ascend from my theater seat.
The story of Titanfall 2 follows Jack Cooper, a grunt that is thrust into the position of a pilot when things go sour in a battle. He then has to complete the mission of the deceased pilot he took place of, while growing a bond with his Titan, BT. While the story may be simple, it's done exceptionally well in the game, and you really grow to love these characters by the climax. It's a game series that is ripe with interesting ideas that I'd love to see turned into a movie. So why are we apparently making a Call of Duty cinematic universe?
Isn't that just like generic war propaganda? Just make a Titanfall movie instead. So, those are 7 video games that I think would make for interesting adaptations. But genuinely, I want to know what you think, because I haven't played every game. I haven't had the privilege or time to play every game out there. So let me know what games you think would be ripe for adaptations in the comments down below.
We also did a whole episode on this exact topic on my podcast, Hate to Interrupt.
Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, and here's to a wonderful year. Perfect. Yes! That's probably one of my best recordings.